While we can use the internet to access the news, learn new skills, and even meet new people, it is not without its drawbacks. Cruel trolls, body image issues, and doom scrolling are just some of the side effects of modern-day technology. But perhaps the worst thing about the internet is that anyone can pretend to be somebody else. Catfishing is rife, and whether you're looking for a partner or just a friend to play games with, it can be hard to discern who's trustworthy and who isn't. In today's episode, we'll be taking a look at just 3 cases of online interactions gone wrong as we examine 3 chilling internet murders. Breck Bednar. Breck Bednar was born on March 17, 1999, in Caterham, Surrey, England. The oldest of 4 children, Breck's American-born parents had settled in the UK a few years before his birth due to his father's job as an oil trader and shipping consultant. His mother, Lauren, worked as a teaching assistant. The couple describes their firstborn son as a loving, affectionate, and intelligent teenager. Like a lot of boys his age, Breck enjoyed playing video games and began making online friends with whom he'd play games with. But it was one of these friends who would, tragically, cut Breck's life short. In 2014, 14-year-old Breck and his other online friends came into contact with Lewis Danes. Danes impressed the younger boys by telling them that he was a computer engineer and that he ran a successful company in New York and worked for the US government. The naive group believed him without proof, though in reality, Danes was 18, unemployed, and reportedly living alone in a flat owned by his grandparents in Grays, Essex. Not only that, but Dane also had several criminal allegations against him. He had been accused of raping a young boy when he was 15 and of possessing pornographic images of children. Despite these allegations, which were brought to the attention of the Essex police in 2011, no charges were ever laid against him. Before long, Breck's mother, Lauren, began to grow suspicious of her son's new friend. She recalled, quote, "I tried my best to stop it, but Breck saw him as some kind of tech guru." She went so far as to contact the police for help after she listened in on a conversation her son was having with Danes, who had a distinctly adult voice. Lauren added that Beck's, quote, "personality was changing and his ideology was changing. He was starting to refuse to attend church with us. I felt like it was because of the negative influence of this person." She told police officers that she believed that Danes was grooming Breck, but no investigation into her allegations was ever carried out. In the weeks leading up to Breck's death, Lauren became increasingly worried. She was reported to have, quote, "limited his access to electronics, installed parental controls, and forbade him from using the same server as the boy she had grown suspicious of." She made it clear as day that she did not approve of Danes or his friendship with her son, but Breck remained unfazed by her efforts to dissuade him from the relationship, likely not understanding the reasoning behind her worries. In February of 2014, Danes made a confession to Breck. He was terminally ill, and he needed somebody to hand his company to following his death. He told Breck he trusted him and wanted him to become the one in charge of the company. So, on February 17th, Breck waved down a cab and made his way to Danes' Essex home, telling his parents that he was going to visit another friend. The details of what happened that night remain largely unknown. 14-year-old Breck was attacked and killed by 18-year-old Danes in what is said to have been a sexually motivated assault. There was evidence that sexual contact had occurred, but the exact nature of it is unknown. The following morning, Danes called emergency services and stated, "My friend and I got into an altercation, and I'm the only one who came out alive." He claimed that the killing had been accidental and that Breck had visited him because he was having trouble at home. He added that the two had an altercation while Danes attempted to stop Breck from taking his own life. Investigators arrived promptly on the scene and soon concluded that there was no fight, that the assault had been entirely one-sided. Breck's wrists and ankles had been bound with duct tape, his throat deeply slashed. His clothing was found in a garbage bag inside the flat, and Dane's electronics were found immersed in water in his sink, as if he was attempting to cover up his trail. Meanwhile, Breck's parents were concerned for his well-being. They couldn't reach him, and he hadn't turned up to meet with his father as planned. Hours later, Breck's younger siblings, 12-year-old triplets, began to receive word that their older brother had been killed. Their friends were sending them condolences after viewing photographs Danes had posted online of the body. At the same time, officers turned up at the family home to break the news. Initially, Danes pleaded not guilty. However, he changed his plea to guilty during his pre-trial hearing. During the event, prosecutors noted that the 18-year-old had purchased duct tape, syringes, and condoms online shortly before Breck's death, and that the crime was, quote, sexually or sadistically motivated. It was also pointed out that Danes had purchased a mobile phone for Breck and sent him instructions on the lies he should tell his parents when he planned to visit him. Meanwhile, the prosecution argued that there was not enough evidence to prove that the crime had been premeditated, and that Danes had Asperger's, which, quote, affected his ability to make sound judgments. After pleading guilty, however, Danes was given a life sentence. He will serve a minimum of 25 years in prison. The Crown prosecutor said of Danes, "Our case was that Louis Danes, even though he was only 18 when he committed Breck's murder, was a controlling and manipulative individual who carefully planned this crime. The degree of planning and manipulation by Danes is shocking, and when you consider the young ages of the perpetrator and victim, it stands out as one of the most cruel, violent, and unusual cases we have dealt with." Despite the sentencing, though, the horror for Breck's family was not over. Lauren began receiving taunts from Danes in a series of blog posts where he claimed he could have fled the scene with his, quote, substantial funds, and that his, quote, actions do not fit the profile that has been created by the media and family. He also argued against the narrative that his flat was grotty and claimed that Breck was suffering abuse at home. Police said there was insufficient evidence to press charges of harassment. Lauren then contacted Google, who was hosting the blog, but they told her to contact Danes, the blog owner. The blog remains up to this day. In 2019, one of Lauren's other children received threatening messages from somebody on Snapchat claiming to be Danes' cousin. The messages included a tombstone and eyeball emojis, and statements such as, "I know where your brother is buried," and "I'm going to smash his tombstone." Though Lauren contacted the police, she was told simply to get some security systems installed. One of the other siblings then received a follow request from somebody impersonating Breck on Instagram. When they contacted the company, they were told only the person being impersonated could take the fake profile down. Lauren continues to advocate for better safety measures for children online after setting up the Breck Foundation. She visits schools to speak to teenagers about staying safe online, while the film, Breck's Last Game, was rolled out to British high schools to encourage teens to be more aware of the people they connect with online. Louis Danes is still behind bars. He will be eligible for release in 2039. Nicole Lovell. On January 27, 2016, 13-year-old Nicole Lovell went missing from her Blacksburg, Virginia home. Her mother, Tammy Weeks, recalled, "I pushed the door open and the nightstand was up against the door. The young girl had climbed out of her bedroom window, taking her mobile phone and her favorite blue blanket with her. When Nicole's mother found her room empty, she promptly tried to contact her daughter, but her calls kept going to voicemail. The police arrived on the scene shortly afterwards, where they began combing the local neighborhood in search of signs of the missing girl or any witnesses. Before long, they got their first clue. A local mother, whose children played with Nicole frequently, remembered that the 13-year-old had mentioned going out on a date. At this point, Tammy grew concerned. Like most modern-day teens, Nicole loved using social media, which helped her to connect with new people. Furthermore, she knew her daughter didn't plan to be away for long, because she knew she had to take her medication every day. Nicole had been born with a damaged liver and required a transplant before her first birthday. By the time she reached her teens, she was used to administering the anti-rejection medication she needed to survive. Though she was used to it, Nicole still struggled with her condition. The operation she'd undergone had left scarring on her neck and torso, and she was frequently subjected to cruel bullying from her peers, which made her despise going to school. Her mother recalled that she'd always ask for a note to skip gym class because the other girls would pick on her in the changing rooms. CBS News noted that Nicole's social media posts reveal a sadly typical teenage story. So lonely she'd had suicidal thoughts, longing for love, and convinced nobody cared about her. Not only did the 13-year-old struggle at school, but she also had a troubled relationship with her father, who'd had many brushes with the law and who often wasn't there for her in the way she needed him to be. He left her mother, Tammy, weeks before her birth. When Tammy worked, Nicole was supervised by her grandparents. However, although her family always knew what she was up to offline, they had no idea what was happening online. Shortly after she went missing, FBI computer forensics experts determined that Nicole was a frequent user of Kik, a messaging app which is best known for allowing users to remain anonymous without needing to provide an email address or telephone number. After getting in contact with Kik, they soon discovered that in the days leading up to her disappearance, Nicole had been in contact with an individual using the name Dr._Tombstone. Though Kik is known for its so-called anonymity, chat threads are not encrypted, and IP addresses are always logged. Using the latter, investigators traced the screen name to an 18-year-old engineering student at Virginia Tech named David Eisenhower. Eisenhower was described as a celebrated student. He was academically gifted, a high school track star, and was charismatic to boot. Nobody thought he was capable of being caught up with a 13-year-old girl, let alone killing her. 3 days after Nicole disappeared, Eisenhower was picked up by the police for questioning. His roommate recalled that on the night of January 27th, he had gone out late wearing robust boots and hadn't come home until 2 a.m. The roommate also recalled that Eisenhower owned a knife, which was often left on his desk, though police were unable to locate it when they came to search his room. Eisenhower told the police that he'd talked to Nicole outside of her house the night she vanished. He claimed that the pair had met on a separate, anonymous messaging app, then moved to Kik. He added that on the night of the 27th, it was his first time meeting her, and when he saw how young she really was, he left, leaving her alive. However, Nicole's chat logs on Kik revealed that the two had been talking for months and indicated that they'd not only met up before, but that they'd likely been physically intimate. Then, Eisenhower offered up a second name, Natalie Keepers, a fellow Virginia Tech student who wanted to work at NASA. He claimed that Keepers had been with him when he purchased a shovel, another bit of information he seemed to volunteer without much pressure. However, Keepers told a different story. She said that Eisenhower feared that Nicole was going to expose their relationship and that he wanted to keep her quiet, so the two began brainstorming ways to kill the 13-year-old. Another friend of Eisenhower's, Bryce Dustin, corroborated this account when he told 48 Hours that Eisenhower had asked for his advice about a girl he was seeing. Bryce recalled, quote, "He told me that he'd found out she was underage and she wanted to be with him, and that she was going to expose him if he wasn't with her. Dustin told Eisenhower he should be her boyfriend, but be a bad one, ignore her calls and texts, and that eventually she'd just go away. But for Eisenhower, this wasn't enough. Keepers explained that they'd purchased the shovel, had something to eat, and then Eisenhower had dropped her off back home as he had a prearranged date with Nicole. That night, he picked the 13-year-old up, drove her into the woods, and stabbed her to death. The next day, Eisenhower and Keepers went to Walmart for cleaning supplies. They left the body near Eisenhower's grandparents' house. Right enough, Nicole's body was discovered where Keepers said it would be. The young girl was unclothed and in North Carolina, about 90 miles away from her home. Her throat had been cut, and she had been stabbed 13 other times. There was more evidence to come. A piece of paper with Nicole's address was found inside Eisenhower's dorm room. His DNA was found beneath her fingernails, her blood was discovered in the trunk of his car, and also on the handle of the shovel he'd purchased with Keepers. Furthermore, keepers had hidden Nicole's blanket, which she'd taken with her when she'd left home, on the night of the 27th. David Eisenhower pled no contest to the charges laid against him. This means he acknowledges that there is enough evidence to convict him, but he will not admit he committed the crime. He was ultimately given 50 years in prison for the murder and abduction of Nicole Lovell, as well as a charge of concealing a body. He will serve a further 25 years as a suspended sentence. Meanwhile, keepers pled guilty to helping Eisenhower conceal Nicole's body and as an accessory to murder. She was given 40 years behind bars. Neither will be eligible for parole. When asked why she helped Eisenhower with his plots, Keeper stated that he made her feel like part of something, and that she wished to maintain his friendship. Richard Beasley. In 2011, at least 4 down-on-their-luck men hoped that the tides were changing when they saw advertisements on Craigslist offering $300 a week, as well as a 2-bedroom trailer they could reside in for free in exchange for work on a Southwest Ohio rural property. The man behind the adverts was 52-year-old Richard Beasley, who'd met each man at the property to show them where they would be working. However, 3 men never made it home. Upon arriving in the wooded area, Beasley would simply walk up behind his victim and shoot them in the head. Beasley wrote alongside his adverts, "Someone older and single preferred." His advertisements often attracted those very men, single with no families, who needed work and a place to stay. These vulnerable victims were ideal for a serial killer who didn't want to be noticed. On November 6, 2011, Beasley's house of cards came tumbling down, however, when he met 48-year-old Scott Davis, the latest man to respond to his listing. Scott met with Beasley and his 16-year-old accomplice, Brogan Rafferty, at a restaurant. Beasley called himself Jack and claimed Rafferty was his nephew. Together, the 3 ventured to the supposed rural property Beasley wanted Scott to manage, but as soon as they reached the wooded area, Scott heard the click of a gun. It hit him in the elbow. Without stopping to think, the 48-year-old knocked the weapon aside and fled from the scene. He made it to a nearby property where he asked the homeowner to call the police. Before long, investigators had arrived on the scene. They made their way to the wooded area Scott had described, recovering his cap, which had left his head as he began running, and locating a pre-dug grave that they believe had been intended for Scott. Nearby, the bodies of 2 other men were recovered, one of whom was named Ralph Geiger. It was soon revealed that Beasley had assumed this man's identity. The second man was identified as David Pauly, whose sister contacted the police and explained that he had gone missing after responding to a Craigslist ad. A third victim was later found, 47-year-old Timothy Kern. Investigators traced the advertisements to a home in Akron, where 1 floor was rented out to Beasley using Ralph Geiger's name. Beasley and Rafferty were caught shortly afterwards when Beasley contacted his landlord. Beasley was no stranger to law enforcement. He'd spent several years in prison in Texas for burglary, and there was some speculation that robbery was his main motive as he carried out the killings. Later, at his trial, his mother Carol would testify that Beasley had suffered from a troubled and traumatic childhood, noting that his stepfather was physically abusive. She also revealed that in the last year, she had learned that he'd been subject to sexual abuse by older neighborhood children in his youth. She added, "I always felt there was much more than he told me." At his trial, Beasley's defense called on a psychologist who testified that the 52-year-old had suffered from depression, alcohol abuse, low self-esteem, and a feeling of isolation, and that this all possibly stemmed from his childhood. Still, exactly how Beasley went from a troubled child to a middle-aged man deciding to commit murder is unclear, though we know that during the interim he had a child, a daughter, who shut down their relationship following his conviction. Brogan Rafferty, meanwhile, also lived a troubled home life. His mother was a drug addict, and he was raised by a single father who spent most of his time working so that he could provide. His father, Rafferty recalled, also had a violent streak. He noted that while his father, Michael, cared for him deeply, he had trouble showing it. Michael admitted that when Rafferty became older and started getting into trouble in school, he'd sometimes slam him against a wall. Rafferty met Beasley, a family friend, during a particularly difficult time in his life, when Beasley became involved in a street ministry. He recalled, "Beasley was my father without the anger. He was calm, rational, and just a family counselor of sorts to whom any of us could go for spiritual or worldly advice." He added, "At the time, I thought he was the greatest thing that ever happened to me." Many believe Rafferty became involved with Beasley's crimes because of the nature of their relationship. The teenager looked up to and admired the middle-aged man, who wielded great power over him. Rafferty would later admit that although he knew what Beasley was doing was wrong, he didn't want to kill him because he would then become a killer himself. He noted, quote, "I thought about having to look his mother, Carol, in the eye and tell her I'd killed her son." He also worried that if he tried to kill Beasley and things went wrong, Beasley could harm Rafferty's family or make things difficult for him. Beasley had once told him he would murder my mother and sister if I told anyone about it. Rafferty has also stated his belief that Beasley killed just because he could, and that he disguised the murders as robbery. In 2013, Beasley stood trial for 3 counts of aggravated murder alongside Rafferty. As Rafferty was a minor, he could not be given the death penalty. Police tried to bargain with him, offering him parole when he was middle-aged if he provided information on Beasley. Rafferty refused to cooperate, however, and was subsequently given life behind bars. Beasley's trial came next. He was given the death sentence. He was convicted not only of aggravated murder, but also attempted murder, kidnapping, and aggravated robbery. Over the years, Beasley has maintained his innocence. In 2018, the Ohio Supreme Court ruled that he must be resentenced due to some technical issues with his original sentencing. However, his death sentence was ultimately upheld. In the years since his crimes were exposed, Beasley's crimes have become infamous, and he has been dubbed the Craigslist Killer. His execution date has not yet been set. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own theories and speculations, and remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.